This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, I'm so happy tonight to have one of my best friends in the world and one of the most prominent legislators in the state, probably the most prominent, besides the Speaker of the House. And I'm proud to call him one of my best friends, my lifetime friend, the Honorable Representative Steve Clouse from Ozark, who has been in the state legislature since 1994. Which, Steve, how many years is that now?
Going on my 26th year now.
26 years. Yeah. My gosh, time flies by.
Right.
Folks, I tell you all this every time that Steve's on. And I tell people this, I've never not known Steve Clouse. Our mamas were best friends. Growing up, Miss Ruth Price grew up in Troy, and she and my mom were good high school friends, and she married Jimmy Clouse from Ozark. And then they had this fine gentleman as their son. But our mom was, even though Steve will tell you I'm 6 years older, is it 5 or 6?
5.
5 years older than him.
Yeah.
Every time he's always telling him I'm older than him, and I am. But anyway, I've never known a finer person and a better legislator. Steve is matriculated to being chairman of the House Budget Committee, which is a very powerful and important job in the state legislature. He represents all of Ozark and part of Dothan, and has for a long time. Ozark, when other things in comparison, we grew up as best friends, but we were in the same fraternity in Alabama. Of course, I'd left by the time Steve got there, but we also represented adjoining districts. My county of Pike adjoins Dale, of course, and I would get the northern part of Steve's county, of Dale County, where he grew up and born and raised. Anyway, that's enough of that stuff. But I've never known a better legislator or a better gentleman than Steve Clouse. Steve, as we head towards this new fiscal year, I want to first of all congratulate you and Bill Poole. I wrote a column fairly recently that y'all have the job of writing the state budgets. Bill Poole from Tuscaloosa has the education budget. You have the general fund. But the COVID thing has been a pandemic that I've never seen in my lifetime. Hopefully never will see it again. Hope my children never see this kind of thing. And for obvious reasons, it's devastated the state's budgets.
Right.
But to tip a hat to you and Bill Poole and the other committee chairman in the Senate, y'all have done such a good job of being prudent with the state dollars that Alabama is affected less than most states, and I'm told in the top 5 in the country, as far as being able to survive this COVID thing.
That's right.
Tell us more about that. If the budget year we're in now,
right.
The COVID have been affected by COVID because you write the budgets.
Right. Well, we just ended the fiscal year yesterday, so to start the new one on October 1st, and of course this will be the 8th year in a row that we've finished education and general fund budget without proration, which has been very unusual for the state of Alabama. And this all happened back in 2011 when Republicans took over the majority in the legislature. And on the education side, we set up what we call a rolling reserve there, where you don't spend everything you got, which was just traditional way to do it, but we would only spend a certain amount based on some benchmarks and carry the other funds that was left over to the next year. And so in case you did run into a rough patch, you'd have some money to rely on. On the general fund side, we haven't had that reserve fund like the education budget. We started one this year, and it's going to grow to about a little over $25 million this next year, which really sort of a drop in the bucket for the general fund, but at least we got something started. But on the general fund side, we've just had to practice real conservative budgeting here, particularly over the last 5 years. Because in 2015, I mean, we were $250 million in the hole on the general fund. And we went in 2 special sessions that year, finally got through and having to just take some major cuts. Did the same thing in 2016, another 2 special sessions. The BP oil settlement, right. We were able to monetize that, pay off some debt, and take care of Medicaid for a few years. And then we had a very fortunate thing that happened with the U.S. Supreme Court finally taking a role in a resolution on the simplified seller's use tax, is what we call it. It's basically the sales tax on internet sales, which had been a point of contention all over the country between states and local governments not being able to collect this tax. And of course, brick and mortar stores were upset about it too, from a competitive standpoint. And the Supreme Court finally allowed this for the states to be to authorize those sales tax to be collected.
Had y'all passed that law prior to the ruling or after the ruling?
Well, we passed it before setting up the mechanism. Of course, it had always been a tax. It's not a new tax. The Supreme Court back in the early 90s had ruled that it was too cumbersome to collect for these what we call mail order companies back then. And that was their argument. We can't send 5,000 different checks out to towns all over the country and 3,000 different checks to counties all over the country. So they rule that it does need to be simple. Just send one check to each state. In this latest ruling, back in the 90s, they ruled you're right. It is too cumbersome for you to do that. So it's up to the consumer to pay the tax. Well, you know how far that got.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
So we went about 25 years fighting that battle.
That money's a lot of that money's going to the general fund then.
Half of it goes to cities and counties. The other half goes to the state, and of that part going to the state, 75% to the general fund and 25% to education budget.
So that ruling and that sales tax thing has been a real manna from heaven for the general fund, hasn't it?
For the general funds, helped the education budget too, and it's really helped cities and counties all over the state.
Yeah, and that's been going on about 4 years. That's one of the reasons why you haven't had such a headache with your budget like you had in 2015.
That's right.
That extra money.
That's right. Because, back in 2015 when we would just barely piece a budget together, and the press would want to know, what kind of plans do you have in the future? Because we did pass a 25-cent tax on cigarettes. We were the third lowest in the nation, and that made us the fourth lowest after that. Now we're back to the third lowest. Just little things like that, patching things together. And of course, we always would say, well, we've got the mechanism in place for the simplified seller's use if the Supreme Court will ever rule, not knowing if they ever would. And then 3 years ago, they finally ruled, and it was certainly, it's helped us and everyone all over the country.
I had not thought about that. I kept thinking in the back of my mind, I said, well, Steve's having an easier time with the general fund than he did a few years back.
Right.
But it's that you be able to tax online sales to get the money off that, which is only fair. That's only a fair thing.
That's right. It's been going up, but here this last 6 months with the COVID and everybody locked down, it's even been more sales online.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So it'll probably tailor off here some in the next few months and years, and particularly when the vaccine comes around and people start going out shopping more.
That thing wasn't fair to the brick and mortar stores either. I mean, not only the state was losing money and the counties and local governments. Steve, now in your general fund budget as we sort of getting into the new fiscal year, even with as bad as it is, y'all were able to give some agencies an appropriate increase. I think, was it mental health? Prisons had to get
mental health in particular. Of course, we always have to start with Medicaid. That makes sure we do the minimum amount so we get that 2-to-1 match from the feds. And but it hadn't, the last couple of years, we've really had some good news from Medicaid with the economy the way it was before COVID hit. The numbers on Medicaid started going down, the enrollment numbers. Not much, but the 4 or 5 years before then, it had been skyrocketing upward. Now it's leveled off and gone down some. That's a little worrisome going forward here with the economy being shut down, that those numbers may start increasing again. So we've got to be on the watch out for that. But we've had a little bit of breathing room with Medicaid over the last couple of years. Prisons is the big issue. I mean, we've added $170 million to them over the last 3 years, and going to probably have to add more. And it's really becoming it's going to be the issue over the next 4 or 5 years.
Backing up to Medicaid, I don't want to put you on the spot and not answer you don't want to, but I've always wondered if there's been some remorse or removing a different train of thought about Republican states like Alabama and our Republican governors have refused to take the Medicaid expansion money.
Right.
Has your position as chairman of the General Fund Committee, do you still think we're doing the right thing by not taking that money?
Well, right now, because we wouldn't get the 3 years.
Oh, you wouldn't get that
of
now.
100% money now. The time to have done that would have been January of 13.
Okay.
And well, you know, the ship's left the shore now. Now, if the ship comes back around and they decide to
you'd be looking
at
it.
It would be something we would need to take a serious look at. If we got 3 years of startup there at 100% federal funding, then that would have to have some serious discussion.
Were you budget chairman then in 2013? How long you been budget chairman?
Yes, I was there then, and of course those decisions based on Obamacare, it's up to the governors of each state to do that. So at that time, Governor Bentley refused to, so it really wasn't anything that went to the legislature.
So you didn't have a say in it anyway?
Right.
Did he even ask you about it?
Well, no, not really.
You've been budget chairman for 8 years now, or 10?
8 years.
8 years. Steve, you'll move on to prisons now. You know, everybody who's followed state funding in government is thinking this was an acute problem. And I'm not saying it's gone away, but it's almost taken I don't know whether COVID's done it or what, but that's been the hardest hot potato put on your plate, is having to fund the prisons under the microscope of the federal government.
Right.
Saying we've got to do this, and you don't want them to take over your prisons because they tell you what to do and how to spend your money. But it seems like that's being eased, and I always assume that the decision on where the prisons are going to be and how you're going to resolve the new prisons are going to be in the legislature, but the governor's just taking the whole thing and running with it.
At this point, I think, of course, they've come out now with the plan there to do this, and there's a lot of questions. And I think over the next couple of months, there's going to be even more questions here. So we'll see.
That's not a done deal.
It's not a done deal. I think the legislature could very well be taking some action on this
Steve,
issue now.
I never have understood how you're going to fund those new prisons with cost savings. Is that true?
Well, you can do that, but you're going to have to close 10 or 11. And by doing that, and that's part of the plan there, is to consolidate the workforce. So part of our problem with prisons right now is the overtime payment, because of it's just hard to find correction officers. You
said that publicly too.
Right. I mean,
the amount of money they make is just hard to find somebody. It's a very dangerous job.
It's a very dangerous job, and they've got a good retirement plan. They can retire to 20 years, but a lot of them don't make it that long. And nobody's ever called. I'm sure nobody ever calls you to help them be a prison guard.
No.
We never get a call.
But I tell you one thing that did happen, though, as close as proximity as your county and mine is to those Barber County prisons, I would have people want me to help them get a job over there.
Right.
And I knew a lot of people who worked over there, and I think those under any plan are going to be closing. I don't know that now.
I don't know that, but
it affects your county. There are people working there, living in Dale County working there.
That's right. But most of these prisons are now at least 30 years or more older, and a lot of them are 50, 60, 70 years old, and they take so much abuse, the prisons do, on a daily basis. The bathrooms, the kitchens, the lavatories, and the locks on the cells. I mean, it's just, you can imagine.
So having a new prison is the way to go. You got to go that way.
There's just so much. It's just practically financially impossible to rehab these buildings.
So Barber ain't gonna make it to the table, I don't think.
I don't know that, but we need to have a conversation about that in the legislature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, change the subject. Boy, y'all are gonna have your plate full beginning in the session in February, because you skipped basically the whole year.
Right.
All this COVID thing has closed the legislature down. There have been issues that had to be swept under the rug. The prison thing's got to be addressed.
Right.
The budgets, obviously. You've got all kind of issues. I'm not even naming them. You can name them. I wish you would.
Well,
but you got reapportionment.
That's going to be the big thing there. That we'll have to have at least two special sessions to
on
deal
reapportionment
with legislative redistricting, which is always controversial.
Yeah.
And then congressional redistricting, which if we happen to lose a congressional seat because of the census count, that will be very controversial.
That's going to be a fight.
That'll be a fight there.
Now, you and I have not had this discussion. You and I talk off the air on the phone all the time. And and we've not had discussion, and we can skip it if you don't want to talk about it. But it has an elephant in the room that I do believe we're going to lose a seat. Now, I don't know that. I'm not a census expert. Well, if we do, and you look at the state, and if the preliminary growth figures are right, the state's population is moving north to Huntsville. I'm afraid that the district that may be on the chopping block may be you and I's congressional district, the 2nd district.
It's hard to say. You just got to, first of all, you'll have to make sure the minority district, which Terry Sewell represents, that will be the first one that has to be drawn. And each of these districts, the 6 that are left, will have to.
Or 5 if left, if anything. It could be 5.
Well, I mean, the total of 6. The total of 6 will have to bring in 130,000 more people somewhere. So her district will have to expand.
It'll go all the state.
It'll probably go from Birmingham to Mobile.
I think it will. I think you get all the black belt. I think it goes from Birmingham. And if you look at a swath of the state, and you look geographically, like she's representing the whole state.
Right.
And I think you're right. You start with that premise. Everybody knows that. You got
and then you got to fill in the blanks from everybody else. So it's none of them will look the same.
No, they will not. And even traditional stuff will go out the window.
Right. I mean, the only one that might look close to the same is the district up in Huntsville that Mo Brooks represents, because it's had such growth in Huntsville and Madison
Well,
County.
Birmingham Palmer's district probably will be left alone. Might not be, though.
I don't think they'll have the growth there that the Huntsville area's had.
No, it hadn't, but I mean, it may be so compact.
But it'll have to expand a bit.
So it won't be sacred.
No.
And here's the other thing about that, too, Steve. If you look at the politics of it, one of those 2 arch conservatives, Mo Brooks in Huntsville, or Gary Palmer in Birmingham, will be the Club for Growth candidate for the U.S. Senate, if indeed Shelby does not run in 2022. And they won't have the interest in protecting their district. So you may have legislators in Birmingham say, carve us up. I'd rather be in 2 or 3 different districts. And that may be to their advantage.
I don't know. I haven't talked to any about that.
It may be to their advantage to do that. So it might be a salvation for us.
Yeah, could be.
Otherwise, if you go under traditional things, they may lasso Dothan and send y'all to
could be to Mobile.
To Mobile.
Or could go all the way up to Anniston.
Exactly. It's one or the other. You got to go one or the other.
Yeah.
I think the folks here in the River region do go north.
Yeah, if we were to lose one, right now there's 3 congressional seats that come through Montgomery. I think that would go down to 2. I don't know, which one it'd be, but I would imagine then Congresswoman Sewell's district would probably have to expand into Montgomery more.
That's the fight for another day.
Right.
But what other issues will be on from the budget standpoint? Your biggest problem will be the prison thing.
That's correct, and mental health is becoming a big issue because of the prisons. There's so many mental health issues in the prisons, so they're sort of like running side by side with each other right now. One of the things we did last year, we allocated $18 million in the mental health budget to build 3 crisis centers around the state, and this is for places for law enforcement to take people who are having some issues, and instead of just dropping them off at the emergency room, they'll have a center to go to where they have some professional help there that can direct them where they need to go. If it's for alcoholism, or if it's for some type of bipolar issue, or they'll be able to direct them to where they need to go instead of just throw them in the emergency room, and they get lost in the shuffle for 3 or 4 days, and then they get discharged and they're back out on the streets, So this is it's an expensive proposition to get these built, and it'll be an expensive proposition to have them fund, but I think it'll make a lot of progress for us to deal in this area.
Steve, I often said this. Let's go back to reapportionment and congressional stuff. Now, I'm not going. We don't know what's going to hold us, but I've often said that you were the perfect person to run for that 2nd congressional district under its current parameters. Now, I'm not saying you're getting old, but the time may have passed to go to Congress. You don't want to go to Congress at 60 years old. I mean, really, because it's just seniority that counts. But, having said that, you were right in the heart of the district, very popular, well known in the Wiregrass. I represent the Dothan, the Ozark area. But I'm glad you stayed in the legislature. Actually, people don't realize this, don't know about politics. You've got more input and power. I tell state senators who come here from this area, like Clyde Chambliss and Will Barfoot, who come on the show annually in this area, you've got more power sitting there as a state senator, one of 35 and really one of 25 in the majority,
Right.
than if you went to Congress as a freshman congressman.
That's
that.
That's right.
I mean, so it's going, whoever goes to Congress, it's 10 years before they know your name.
That's right. You got to stay so long to build up. It's all about the seniority, and it's just.
It'd be a demotion for you.
Yeah, well,
to being chairman of the House Budget Committee in the state legislature, to go into being a freshman House member in Congress.
But and you, as you know, running for Congress or the Senate, it's just so expensive.
Oh yeah. But having said that, let's talk a little bit. We only got about 6 minutes left. You've got deep roots in Dale County, born and raised there. The Stegall family, that's the last congressman that we had from the Wiregrass, I think, in that era.
Terry Everett.
Terry Everett, that's right. But Stegall, from Ozark, though, the only congressman from Ozark. Have y'all ever had a congressman from Ozark up Stegall?
No, that's the only one.
But Stegall was during the New Deal.
Right.
And served about 26 years, was chairman of the banking committee, passed the last Stegall Act. Now tell me about his family. The Henry Stegall that I knew, who was, he was finance director for George Wallace when I was in the legislature, but he'd served a long time in your House seat, the same seat you serve in.
That's right, 16 years.
But he was his nephew.
He was
just named Henry,
yeah,
wasn't he?
His nephew, but he's got 2 sons that still live in Ozark.
One of them's a judge who just retired.
Just retired. The other one's an attorney there.
Tell us their names now.
Well, the older one's Henry.
After his dad.
Right.
He's just a practicing lawyer.
He's a lawyer in Ozark, and then Fred is the
judge.
He just retired, but he's still doing some mediation work. In fact, I had supper with him last night.
Well, tell him hello.
I will.
Because he's been a good friend over the years.
Good
I remember
guy.
him running the first time they made those district judgeships.
Right.
See, they didn't have every county didn't have a judge. It was just circuit.
Well, we had one, but they've created another one in Dale County. So
y'all got 2 district judges
in Dale County, right? He ran for that in 1986.
The first time they had him, you see. Well,
right.
One time I remember him running. He was a real young guy.
Right.
Yeah. And he was the Henry Stegall who was the
finance director.
Finance director. So that was his 2 children.
Right.
Well, Henry did he practice law by himself? Who was he practice with?
By himself.
And I should ask this: now, is Mr. Henry their daddy passed away?
Yeah, he died back in 1999.
Right. And then James Sasser followed him in that seat. Who followed him?
Fred Barquette.
Who's kind of kin to you, isn't he?
He is. He's my first cousin. And he was there for 4 years, and then James Sasser took over in '74, and he stayed for 12 years.
Yeah, Sasser was on the Ways and Means Committee and did a lot for Ozark.
Yeah.
None of them were ever chairman. But Henry Stegall was on the Ways and Means Committee in the House.
Yeah, but he wasn't chairman.
He wasn't chairman. So all the Ozark legislators who stayed a long time were on Ways and Means. James Sasser and Henry Stegall, but you the only one been chairman. I don't know that Dothan's actually had a sitting person ever serving Congress.
I don't think
actually
so.
From Dothan.
I don't think so.
They never had one. Did you ever know the old man who was a congressman? He'd passed away before you were born, wasn't he?
Yeah, he died before I was born.
But now, wasn't his original house on the same street your house is on?
Yeah, it's three houses down.
I remember walking down that street, and I loved Joe Adams, the editor of the paper, and Joe knows all the history if he can hear you, and I love the way everybody in Ozark calls the one Joe Adams, a newspaper Joe, and one lawyer Joe.
Lawyer Joe, paper Joe, and lawyer Joe.
Paper Joe and lawyer Joe. Daddy's still doing fine.
Yeah.
I enjoyed visiting with him. The other day, he seemed to be okay. I was talking to a guy the other day that has roots down there in Dale County. I was talking about. He says, I told him how long you and I had known each other. He said, I remember as a little boy, Mr. Jimmy Clouse coming to our house and putting propane gas in our farm tank. I remember George Wallace coming and vaccinating dogs.
Yeah.
He said, I'm the only one that I can tell you, Jimmy Clouse sold us our first tank of gas, and George Wallace vaccinated our dogs.
That's right.
Wallace's granddaddy was a medical doctor.
He's a doctor.
But he actually, they were so antiquated back then that the medical doctors would vaccinate dogs. They go cows out in the country, and Dale and Pike border barber. So Wallace, I said, well, John, that makes sense because I guess Wallace would come to your county too, and do that. But Steve, I reckon you all just stay there as long as you live, you know, because ain't no reason to quit doing it, because it's not that bad drive. Now, you do have to spend a night up here, don't you?
I spend, when we're in session, 2 nights a week.
Because it's too big a long a drive.
Right.
I used to drive back to Troy, but it was only about a 40-minute drive.
Right.
You know, and I had little children. I had to go back and see my daughters a little.
It's gotten so difficult to get through Troy now.
It has, hadn't it?
Really has.
231 is just a slog. That's why you can't make that commute.
That's right.
Troy ain't grown that much. It's just the college has grown so much.
Right.
And everything's gotten there on that 231.
Right.
What part of Dothan do you have?
I got the northwest section there from.
Do you have all that Westgate box?
Not all of it, but a good bit of it.
So people in that box, they vote for you and the person in Dothan.
Right, vote for me and Jeff Sarles and Paul Lee. All three of us have part of that box there. But
They broke that box up and put some of those people over there by the Flowers Hospital over there. But Westgate at one time, and I guess the way they divided that box, was the most Republican box in the state of Alabama.
And a big box, too.
It really was.
Mm-hmm.
Do you vote? Where everybody in Ozark vote?
At the Civic Center.
Civic Center. Mm-hmm. Just about everybody does.
Right, everybody does. Used to be spread out different, but they put everybody at the Civic Center now.
Well, you sure ain't got to go far to church. Were you born and raised in that church?
That's right.
First Methodist Church of Ozark. Steve Clouse lives right across the street from it. Y'all don't go knock on his door if you don't, like they do in Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and then in Washington. If some controversial issue, I may have done the wrong thing telling them where you live, but
No.
Troy and Ozark are type towns. People know where you live, don't they?
They know where I live.
They find you, don't they?
No problem.
Folks, I hate it, but our time's up. Our guest tonight has been one of my best friends in the world and one of the best legislators probably in state history, Representative Steve Clouse from Ozark. He represents Ozark, Dale County, and part of Dothan. We thank Steve for taking our time out of his business schedule for being with us, and we thank you viewers for watching. Hope you tune in again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.